Law enforcement already stated that they have an informant. Steve Gonsalves allegedly found this informant, and law enforcement stepped in and told Steve Gonsalves to stay away. So how crucial is this informant to the Idaho 4 case? Hey everyone, it's Lucky with Unfiltered Lucky. And today I want to talk a little bit about why we might think that there's an informant in this case. Now, a lot of us have believed from the very beginning that law enforcement had an informant that led them to Bryan Kohberger. In these leaked messages that were just released between Steve Gonsalves and a content creator, Steve Gonsalves mentions this informant. He claims that law enforcement was on to Bryan Kohberger because of this informant. Now, I can't confirm the source of these messages, so I'm going to say that they're not confirmed, but it's definitely something to think about. Many of us have felt that there was an informant in this case, or even possibly a co-defendant. And then Steve Gonsalves mentions an informant in his messages. So that's quite the coincidence. Now, I've always believed that there is an informant in this case. And one of the reasons that I've always believed that is because I feel like law enforcement had an indication the very first day that these crimes occurred. The University of Idaho issued a number of alerts on the day that these crimes occurred. Now, they issued an alert at 1 p.m., just 1 hour after 911 was called about these crimes. And that alert basically was informing the people on campus kind of a little bit about what was going on. Now, at just after 3 o'clock p.m., so 3 hours after 911 was called, the University of Idaho issues a shelter in place. So basically telling everybody on campus, stay inside. There's a dangerous situation happening in this area. But only 30 minutes later, the University of Idaho lifts that shelter in place and basically tells everybody on campus that they're free to move around. Just keep your eyes open. So that's kind of strange. Why lift the shelter in place only 3.5 hours after 911 was called when there's no suspect or no person of interest? Law enforcement didn't really know anything about what was going on because it had only been 3 hours since they arrived at the scene. Now, investigators are on scene, and Moscow Police Department has called out for help from state and federal agencies. Now, these investigators are working around the clock, and there's a lot of them. But who finds the grub truck footage, as well as the neighbors' footage from the King Road house? Olivia Gonsalves finds that information, not investigators. Olivia Gonsalves knew how important that it was to gather evidence as quickly as possible before it disappeared. Many security cameras roll over after 24 hours. People forget. And there's a lot of information that can be lost if it's not gathered quickly. And Olivia Gonsalves knew this, and she jumped on it immediately and began gathering information. Now, why didn't all of these investigators do the same thing? So how urgent were these investigators in the very beginning if Olivia Gonsalves is the one finding all of the big clues? There didn't seem to be a lot of urgency in this investigation. Now, when Chief Fry got in front of the microphone and reassured the community that there was no danger, when he reassured the people of this community that they were safe, this was an isolated attack, and either the individuals in the house or the house itself was the target. So nobody else is in danger. Well, when he said that, I automatically thought to myself, they have a suspect. They have someone in custody. Some would say that Chief Fry is a public figure, so it's his job to go in front of the public and reassure them that everything is okay so that they don't have panic, which that's a very good point and definitely a possibility. But I can definitely say that if there's a homicidal maniac, or the possibility that there might be a homicidal maniac in my neighborhood, and law enforcement tells me that there's no danger in this community, but they don't have a suspect or have anybody in custody, then I'm going to have some questions. Because how do they know that there's no danger to the public unless they have eyes on a suspect or they have someone in custody? How does law enforcement know where the person or people who committed this crime are at unless they have eyes on them? How do they know that this person is not still in the community? How do they know that this is the only house, or that these are the only victims that this person or people who committed these crimes are targeting? It's very possible that this person may have more targets who were not in the house that night. So it seems strange that law enforcement would lead the public to believe that they were safe. Now, in the first week of December, only 3 weeks after these crimes occurred, Chief Fry pulls up to the crime scene at 1122 King Road, driving a U-Haul truck. Now, law enforcement proceeds to remove potential evidence from the King Road house and load it into this U-Haul truck. So that seems very strange, to be removing potential evidence from an active crime scene and just loading it up in a U-Haul truck. This is meant to send a message, in my opinion. All of the media was there, so everyone saw law enforcement carrying these belongings out of the crime scene and loading them into this U-Haul truck. So in my opinion, this was a show of confidence by law enforcement, sending a message to let the community know that we have this. We have everything that we need. We don't even need this evidence any longer. So basically a show of confidence to the community from law enforcement, which is kind of strange because at this point, they still haven't announced that they have a suspect in custody or even a person of interest. Now, we know at this point that they did have eyes on Brian Kohberger already at this point. The same day that they load up the victim's belongings and pack them into a U-Haul truck, they also make an announcement, and law enforcement asks the public for help in finding a 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra. They post a couple of stock photos, so they don't post any actual photos of this vehicle, but they post a couple of stock photos of 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantras, which of course floods their tip lines. Because who's not seeing a white Hyundai Elantra out there on the road? Now, why would they flood their own tip lines. We already know that when they asked the public for help in finding this white Hyundai, they already had found this white Hyundai. They already had eyes on Bryan Kohberger in the end of November. So when they asked for the public's help in locating this Hyundai, they already know the location of this Hyundai. So why would they ask for the public's help? Why would they ask for help finding a car that they've already found? It kind of seemed like they were just going through the motions. And a lot of us picked up on that. It's like watching someone search for something who secretly knows where it is already, but they go ahead and play along with it. Many tips went unanswered. Many leads were discounted. And many of the people who were with these victims right before they lost their lives were cleared of any involvement right away. One of them over a phone call, reportedly. So it almost appears as though law enforcement is going through the motions, but that they already have an answer. What would give law enforcement that type of confidence that early in the investigation? Someone who saw what happened. Maybe the individual who was taken to the hospital that morning. Maybe the 4 people who were seen running from the direction of the house at just after 3 a.m. on police body cam footage from the Banfield. Now, did investigators see that? Because I have a feeling that if investigators would have seen those 4 individuals in that footage running from the King Road house, I don't think that they would have released that body cam footage to the public. So how closely did investigators look at this body cam footage from the Banfield? Is it possible that maybe the DoorDash driver witnessed something at the King Road house that morning? The DoorDash driver showed up at the house at exactly the same time that law enforcement believes that these crimes began. Maybe the 6th roommate was at the house that night. We know that she was at the house the night before for a party. So how do we know that she didn't use this bedroom on the 1st level? There's also the possibility that there was an accomplice who maybe was injured while committing these crimes and had to go to the hospital. You know what they say? The first one to cooperate with law enforcement is the one who gets the best deal. Does law enforcement have someone who was cooperating with their investigation? Who do we know who may have picked up charges during that time? Who may have been at the King Road house? Maybe Emma and Demetrius? They could have been at the house. So, who would really benefit from cooperating and working with law enforcement? It's very possible that there was a victim who got away from the house that night. And maybe they're cooperating and working with law enforcement in this investigation. It's very possible that law enforcement is protecting this witness. It's also possible that if Bryan Kohberger did commit these crimes, that maybe he had an accomplice who got injured committing these crimes and was captured because they had to go to the hospital. That would put them in a pretty bad position and would definitely create a situation where they might cooperate with law enforcement with the agreement that they would be protected. Emma and Demetrius could definitely benefit from this by having their charges either reduced or dropped. And they could have definitely been at the King Road house. Maybe someone from the frat house who's being protected. I have a very, very strong feeling that these frat boys know exactly what happened in that house that night. Another indication that would make me believe that law enforcement had an informant from the very beginning is the fact that they demolished the crime scene. They demolished the King Road house, wiped it off the face of the earth, and buried it. So they didn't need that anymore. And they seemed very confident that they had everything that they need, so they no longer needed the crime scene anymore. So it's just been the way that law enforcement has handled this investigation that leads me to believe that they're getting inside information. It's almost as though they're just going through the motions, but they already know. Why would they do that? It's very possible that law enforcement has an informant that's giving them inside information, and they're going through the motions in order to protect this informant. Now, this could be, a victim who got away from the crime scene, or, as I said before, this could also be an accomplice. This could possibly be a co-defendant. Now, law enforcement would want to protect this person because it's very possible that their entire investigation depends on the information that they received from this informant. So tell me what you think. Do you think that there's an informant in this investigation that has been giving law enforcement information this entire time? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for hanging out with me today. And if you like my content, please hit the like button and please subscribe. I really do appreciate it. We'll see you next time.